Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink says SAMWU should be held liable for the trail of destruction in the capital city due to the wage strike that has turned violent. He says the city will be pursuing civil lawsuit claims against the labour union to cover the bill to repair affected infrastructure. Briefing the media on the strike in Pretoria, the mayor said they are hot on the heels of and following good leads to find the masterminds behind the torching of trucks.
Law enforcement managing the SAMWU strike will be beefed up. This as violence, intimidation and destruction have formed an integral part of the SAMWU strike that began late July. The city says it is following good leads on the criminals responsible for the torching of the truck.
Relating to the criminal attacks on the waste collection trucks, we have a major lead. And unfortunately, I cannot disclose all of the information that I currently know because I do not want to compromise the investigation.
122 workers have been fired since the strike began 4 weeks ago. 22 have been arrested for acts of public violence, among others.
4 criminal cases were reported at the SAPS and are currently under investigation. They range from public violence, 2 cases, and there were 19 arrests. Malicious damage to property, 5 cases still under investigation.
3 waste disposal trucks have been torched since August and are now being escorted by Tshwane Metro Police and the SAPS. The city says efforts are being implemented to beef up the security cluster handling the strike.
Also, the formal structures that SAPS have in place, they call them prof joints on provincial level. That is a committee comprising of South African Police Services, SSA, as well as members of the Defence Force.
Mayor Brink says the city will approach the courts on September the 13th to make the interim court interdict against the strike a final order of the court. Offenses Timo, SABC News, Pretoria.
Right, well, the city of Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink weighs in on the civil claim against SAMWU and certainly what has been going on around the city of Tshwane. Very good evening to you, Mr. Brink. Thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good evening. Good to be with you.
All right, let's start here. You've requested assistance from the National Intelligence to deal with the strike. What makes you believe, and I think this is something that you said, what makes you believe that the national key points will be targeted?
So the problem is that once you commence a violent criminal campaign such as this one, it is very difficult to get it under control again. I think that SAMWU has embarked upon this unprotected strike, and there's one of 2 possibilities. Either they've lost control or they've continued to drive the unprotected strike action, including the instances of sabotage, intimidation and criminality. And once you reach beyond a certain point, then the chaos that you've created creates opportunities for further criminality. And us being close to a number of national key points, there is a significant risk, say that a certain protest would be hijacked and that key infrastructure might be attacked.
Yeah, I understand that you have engaged with the Police Minister Begitelo on deploying more police to the capital city. What sort of feedback are you getting, and how was that engagement with the Minister?
So right at the beginning of the strike, I spoke to the Minister and I asked for assistance to deploy police to our strike management JOC, our committee that's dealing with the strike, and that was done. And there has been good cooperation with the South African police. The city of Tshwane is sharing information with police daily. But I think we've reached the point where, as we've seen in 48 hours, we've had 2 waste trucks being torched. We've seen a serious escalation of the violence and criminality. And I think it's important for us to notify the public, to give a broader summary of the situation, and to share what the risk is. So we will be asking for far more rigorous assistance, especially from crime intelligence, because it's clear that many of these acts of criminality, of arson, sabotage, are well coordinated.
Yeah.
So there should be monitoring of WhatsApp conversations, telephone calls, and all of the other things which a municipality can't do by ourselves. We do need crime intelligence to step in.
Yeah. And what do you make of some who saying, well, look, the employees affiliated to us are actually not striking?
The truth is that the majority of people who work for Tshwane are back at work, want to work. It's a small group of people that are instigating massive chaos. And what is unfortunate is that right at the outset of the strike action, we didn't have SAMWU saying there shouldn't be this unprotected strike. People should return to work. People should not turn to violence and destruction. They waited effectively 3 weeks, and then their secretary in Tshwane gave an interview saying people must return to work. But we haven't had a full-throated condemnation of the violence. And so I think there's this ambiguity still. And even in the labor court, when we went to the labor court to obtain an interdict against the strike action and then later a contempt of court ruling, SAMWU simply denied that there was an unprotected strike. But I think that the folks who've been sitting in the dark, sitting without water, waste not being collected, if we look at the fires that are started at garden refuse sites, and of course the torching and attack of waste collection trucks, there clearly is an unprotected strike that is way beyond a labor dispute now, and has evolved into a criminal assault on Tshwane and our communities.
All right, you talk about possible instigators. I also heard you talking about possible intercepting of calls and messages. That would, to me, mean that you have possibly an idea or a link as to who may be responsible for all of this. And I think I heard you in an earlier clip talking about that there's some sort of major lead. What were you talking about there?
So let me just be clear that when I talk about intercepting calls and so on, this is what I suggest is beyond the power of the city of Tshwane. Tshwane Metro Police does bylaw enforcement, traffic control, and preventative policing on a smaller scale. But the type of things that I'm referring to is what you would require at a policing level. We would need the South African police and crime intelligence to step in, because those things we can't do. They're beyond what a municipality at this stage, at this current time in our constitutional evolution can do. We do have a lead on the instance, the last instance where a waste removal truck was torched. It's a very clear lead. Unfortunately, I've been prompted not to share too much information so that we don't compromise the investigation. But it's certainly something that we want to pin on the public notice board, and we want this matter to be tracked. So if you speak to me in a week's time and I still can't give you information, that there would be seriously something wrong. But I do want to signal that we've got a very strong lead.
All right. Let's talk about the services that have been affected. Obviously, you did mention in the press briefing that the strike is an attack on communities that are not receiving service delivery. And I mean, we also spoke about an attack on the waste collection trucks, and some of those services having to be suspended. Let's take a look at what's actually going on inside Tshwane at this time, and how much this is all having an impact on the people of Tshwane.
Yeah, so there are three vulnerabilities: water, electricity, and waste collection. And what we've seen is instances of employees reporting to work. Of course, there's been several dismissals of folks who refuse to work and haven't answered ultimatums. 122 people dismissed. But in other instances, we see folks signing in attendance registers and then refusing to take work instructions to go and repair electricity and water and so forth. Then the city has to get contractors to do that work. That's an additional expense, that's a delay, and that's why we're seeing, especially in places such as Shoshonguve, which traditionally has a lot of electricity issues, illegal connections, overloads, things that blow up, that the repair times are delayed because of the strike action. And this creates a lot of frustration. In other instances, we've got water outages, leaks that have to be repaired, folks without water. And then, of course, the most visible is instances where we haven't been able to collect waste, and waste is piling up. So this is the effect it's having. And unfortunately, even though we've been making good progress on waste collection, for example, the attack on these trucks immediately mean that contractors would want to withdraw their services. That creates a further backlog. And it's clear that this was, even if it might not be the design now, it was part of the original design, put as much pressure on the city, make residents angry, turn us against each other, and then hoped that we would buckle and pay salary increases despite what council has undertaken.
All right, Cilliers, thanks very much for giving us your time. That is the Mayor of the city of Tshwane, Cilliers Brink, speaking to us there.